Yesterday's price action. It was extremely nice and precise, so I wanted to go over it. And what I also uh, wanted to go over is that I actually made a discovery, which is not you're not able to see it at the moment. But at the moment, when I was actually trading the session, we saw a potential 4 hour, uh, or my bad, a daily breakaway gap being created. So I wanted to go over exactly how you could spot that in real time, because the daily for value gap had not yet been prevented, but we stopped just above it. We just tapped into the 4 hour value gap to then fly higher. So we were in the making of a daily for value gap. But the reason I believe that the breakaway gap, or the it's not it was never created, but if it would have been created, uh, why it actually was a breakaway gap in that case was because of the no resistance towards the target, which was this previous week high, which we can see here on the weekly time frame. This week's high inside of that weekly bearish fair value gap. So what we saw was on the 4 hour, the narrative, meaning the discount array in this case, which could push price higher, was this 4 hour fair value gap, which we stung into during London session perfectly. Just a tap into it and then close the candle with a wick, which is exactly what we want to see, to then fly higher. Extremely aggressive, because we had no resistance. This was the last bit of resistance, this 4 hour value gap, which was not even actually resistance, uh, because these highs were the last draw, because the 4 hour value gap here had already been mitigated. So when we came above here and we had the retracement into this 4 hour value gap, there was no 4 hour PD ray that was withholding price from reaching this target. And it's important that you always want to use uh, the same time frame for your resistance as your narrative, meaning the PD rate that will push price in the direction you're trading towards. So in this case, since it was 4 hour PD ray, I was looking for 4 hour resistance, which we had none. And also I wanted to break down today's price action a bit more, into a bit more depth. So what we saw here as well on the 1 hour was not that clear, except that we did not follow through on this hourly PD array, hourly fair value gap. You can see we came into it and we had the rejection, ended up sweeping this high to then, I believe, on the 15 minutes create 15 minutes fair value gap lower. Yes, perfectly, which is what we would want to see for a hourly fair value gap disrespect, and 15 minutes fair value gap going through it if it has already been mitigated. That is textbook. So at that moment in time, the London session had not even opened. Here at 3 a.m., this fair value gap is not a valid PD array anymore. It's not a valid fair value gap because it has already been mitigated. So at the open, we actually prevented this new bearish fair value gap from being created, and we pushed higher, kind of a manipulation move here, through the fair value gap. Remember, now the premium array that we can continue lower from is not the fair value gap, it's not anything in here, but it's simply the previous candle high, which we ended up sweeping to then again prevent this new bullish 15-minute fair value gap from being created, which was which the lower time frame was also supporting the idea of this being the target. But if this is a target, then automatically this 4 hour value gap becomes the target, because again, 15-minute narrative, we have no 15-minute resistance. Everything has already been mitigated. So here, if we go into the 1 minute time frame, we can see this was the previous candle high sweep. This was the prevention of the fair value gap. We can see at that moment in time we had created a small fair value gap here, which we came up to, had a bit of consolidation, and then we had a new fair value gap, which in this case the new fair value gap lower confirms the intermediate term high, meaning the high that should not be traded above. It confirms that high, uh, which it should not be taken until the target has been reached. And as well here, I believe it was below this, because at that moment in time we had a consolidation on the 5-minute time frame. Yes, you can see here the 5-minute was consolidating, but when we then eventually had this 5-minute fair value gap overlapping with the order block here, we stung into that. That was when we aggressively took the target here. So that would be a lower probability scalp, which I was looking at, but since we were about to create a fair value gap and we have CPI today, the next day, because this was tomorrow's or yesterday's price action. Um, then after we came into this 4-hour fair value gap, I was kind of shocked how quickly we took off, but at the same time, not really. But the only thing that was making me skeptical was the CPI news today, and that there was no news tomorrow during this day. But anyways, what we saw was that we stung into it perfectly on the 15-minute here, respecting it. And as I mentioned or went over earlier in the video, was that we had no resistance that was withholding price from reaching this target, and that made price extremely explosive. So we can see here we had the 5-minute ST immediately after we tapped this. Oof, excuse me. And we then later on continued higher off of that. So when we took that, when we tapped that 5-minute fair value gap overlapping with the breaker here, or the order block, I believe this would be the breaker. We tap that here if you want to get a fractal entry. Could have went into the 1-minute time frame, and from here taken the first fair value gap creation, either off of that or in the fair value gap. But I always like to take my entries off of the creation, which would be this candle. Covering whatever you feel comfortable with. This would be the most high probability stop loss, but of course you do you. Or you could even, if you enter on the creation, you could even put your stop loss below the trapped traders release, because here trapped traders will be released, trade below that, which is not ideal, or should not happen if we want to seek opposing liquidity. But this price action yesterday was extremely nice, and I am kind of annoyed, or not annoyed, annoyed is not the right word, but I am not very happy that I missed out on these opportunities just because I was thinking so much about CPI today. And eventually, when we took that high, we had a sharp turn, if anything, huge sharp turn here on the 15-minute, continue lower, even on the 1 hour. And I believe this can be the real top to then continue lower potentially today with CPI. But that is up for price to decide. So let's actually take a look now at the current price action. And to me, we do have a quite clear target. We had equal lows here. This is not a valid fair value gap anymore. On a 4-hour, what PD array can we target? We do have this order block right here. Could potentially be a target. And That is if we run these lows though. How can we get there? On the 1 hour we are currently sweeping this high, and I do believe that it was London Open, yes, that pushed us up in there. So if we now prevent this fair value gap from being created, with a nice 1 minute or 5 minute fair value gap that we could continue to lower from, that could be something nice to look for. So that is, it's actually looking really nice here. And since we also had this clear, because this is a textbook sharp turn, it's absolutely beautiful, and I don't see any resistance here towards these lows except for the order block. But so we could potentially expect CPI to just fall down fast. That is what I'm looking at though.